Hello and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Atlanta's Movers and Shakers. I am your host, Mandisa Johnson. Today, we are having a conversation with Adetinpo Thomas, who is an actor and award-winning filmmaker from Carson, California. She received her undergraduate degree in theater from the University of Georgia and an MA in acting from the University of Connecticut. Her projects Clean Slate and The Earth Will Not Swallow Us have shown in festivals from San Diego to Barcelona. On screen, she is best known for her work on Hawkeye and Black Lightning. Most recently, she joined the cast of the musical film adaptation of The Color Purple. Hello, Adetinpo. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So, we gave you a brief introduction, but could you share a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do in the Atlanta film and TV community?
So I think you nailed it. I might have made my bio too thorough because whenever I get asked this question, I'm like, I don't know, you said all the stuff. But I have lived in Atlanta. My family moved here when I was in high school, and I went to grad school in Connecticut, but ended up coming back. And I've really enjoyed the warmth that is in this community. I think it can be very easy for people to be in technical competition with each other and then tearing each other down or sabotaging or just not being supportive generally. And that's not necessarily the case in Atlanta. There is that hospitality, I guess you could say, even from the folks who are coming from somewhere else. You realize that the tone here is we are a community and we support one another, not um, backbiting and gossip. But for what it's worth, I also generally mind my business and watch TV with my husband. So who knows what's happening outside my house? But that being said, I work in the independent filmmaking community. I've made my own shorts. I am joyfully in other people's shorts whenever they ask. And I have just started teaching at Georgia State, actually. I'm teaching acting and directing for the camera, which has been a really cool experience to kind of shepherd and cultivate a technique and a approach to the art that I think is a lot more rooted in compassion than it has been in the past. And I think also the perspective of it being a Black woman teaching, when historically I think a lot of film and TV departments in general are led and populated by white men. So I think it's been useful in so many ways, being me, the person that's in the room, or me being the person that's in the room, rather. So, what do I do in Atlanta? I act and I make stuff and I teach stuff sometimes.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And the Atlanta film community you're right, it's very different. I interviewed a casting director
Oh,
who,
which one?
um, always forget Marlo Teedy, who
Yes.
she was with. I can't think of the name of the casting company, but um, she was saying how in LA it's more like get it where you fit in, whereas here we're more of a community. We're more willing to help.
Hmm.
So you're absolutely correct in that. Um, what she said and what I've experienced and what other people have experienced
Hmm.
too. So can you take us on your journey of how you started to where you are today?
Yes. So, how did I start acting? I did like a play in elementary school. I think as most people do. I was never shy per se. I could always stand in front of a room full of people and it never fazed me at all, which often gets you put in the front to do the speech or to say the memory verse at church or to do the, you know, soliloquy for the class project. So that was a simple kind of bite there. But I think really and truly, I have to give a big shout out to one of my childhood best friends. I can't tell you her name because it is my password for the question about who my childhood best friend
Okay.
is. Right?
Okay.
Right? Okay, so it's I don't mean to gatekeep. She's wonderful. But she was the child actor. She has this beautiful red hair and freckles, and she was just the cutest kid. I remember like her at 6 and just would be in all the commercials. And it was a real tangible thing. She also had friends in the industry, and I'll never forget going to watch Spy Kids with Daryl. Oh, I can't think of his last name, but he's married to Megan Trainor now.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was sitting next to him and my friend who's in commercials, and I was like, oh, this is very normal mostly.
Uh-huh.
Um, what made it feel not necessarily tangible was being Nigerian and the expectation being, some sort of official doctor, lawyer, engineer, accounting type of position. So from there, my family moved to the state of Georgia when I was in high school, and I was like, let's join the drama club. Why not? Like, let's do whatever. And my very first like real thing as like a sentient being on stage was the musical Footloose, and I can still remember the choreography, and it was electric. It was such a good time. I enjoyed the building of community. I liked the singing and the dancing, and I was convinced I was going to be dancing through life in the ensemble of Wicked for my career for the rest of my life. Then I realized what that took, and I was like, I'm going to do straight plays. So after studying theater at the University of Georgia, I found myself in Italy, actually being an au pair, because I was also a business major and was like, I'm never going to use this. So I dropped my major. I shit you not. It was like a Wednesday. I'm sitting in business statistics in the middle of July, and the teacher's talking, and it kind of turns into that like Charlie Brown, like walk, 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 walk. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do use business statistics. And I left the class and I walked to my advisor and I dropped my business major all entirely. And I think there was like a test the next day and a test the next day because it was one of those like the whole semester's in 3 weeks. And I think I failed the class. And then I graduated a semester early and I was like, I'm going to go to Italy because my one of my like RAs when I was a freshman went to go be an au pair in France, I think. And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. I love Italy. I'm going to go there. And while I was in Italy, a friend of mine got into Harvard's MFA program, and I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And again, the Africanness was like, you need to get a master's in something. And I was like, ah, joke's on you. You didn't specify, gonna go get it in acting. So that's what I did. I applied to schools. It took a couple years because I stubbornly only auditioned for Yale for I think 2 years in a row. And then that third year I did URDAS and got into the University of Connecticut. I imagine my spirit knew it was supposed to be Connecticut. I was just aiming for the wrong school. So I was really grateful for that training. I know you have an MFA as well, and there's nothing that surpasses the like conservatory style training when it comes to really getting your mind, body, voice like working in tandem to create a character. It's really a blessing and a privilege. So I try not to skim over that as if it is frivolous. Then I was talking to a friend of mine and decided I didn't want to spend 3 years in that program. So I only wanted to do a year and a half. And they let me leave with a degree. Shout out to the University of Connecticut. And I moved back to Atlanta. And what is not normal, which I can honor and I'm grateful for. Thank you, universe. I moved back in December, and in January I had an agent.
Wow.
And I think by March I'd booked a national commercial, and I was like, okay, maybe I could do this. This is my maybe my mom will be convinced. She's not really convinced, but I've been here ever since. So that was 2016, and I have different reps now for what it's worth. But I've been acting and creating, and the creating comes from wanting to fill the vacuum of what's being offered to me to act in. Being dark skin, ow, shout out to dark skin girls. We out here, pew, 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 pew. And being a woman for a lot of minds that are not as open as they should be, that makes all the spectrum of what you can be in shrink down to this. And then of course me not being one of the five A-list celebrity Black women that they let exist at a time.
Mm,
um at best I was going to be able to walk up and say one line or one word, and being able to do some indie projects really gave me the confidence of like, wait a second, I can lead a thing, I can be the series regular in a mini series, I can carry an entire story and do it well and do it confidently. And that has been a blessing in terms of my own work, because now going forward onto bigger budget projects, I still have that like assurance. What has also been really lovely is that as someone who's come up in Atlanta, almost all of our auditions are self-tapes. So I don't have the like soul grating experience of going to a room and everybody looks just like me and feeling like a number. I don't have that like intense competition and like stress and anxiety around auditions because I film a lot of my auditions in this room with my husband or at the kitchen table before I had an office to myself. And being able to walk in with that confidence, a community of support, and then the training has really, I think, given me a little bit of a boost in terms of what I've been able to accomplish in the amount of time that I've done it. So, yeah, that's how I got here.
Wow, that's amazing. That is so amazing. So, my next question is, growing up, did your parents recognize your love of the arts? And if so, how did they facilitate growth to nourish your gift? I know you said you started in plays in elementary school, which I did too, but can you share if how they recognized it and how they nourished your gift?
I became an actor in spite of my parents' wishes.
Okay.
No one was surprised that I was an orator. My father can make a room full of people laugh at the drop of a hat. He like laughing so hard he is now crying from his own joke. He's laughing. Like I come from a family of public speakers, so
Okay.
that didn't seem unreasonable. We had a TV in quite literally every room in the house, so being kind of obsessed with TV and movies didn't seem unreasonable. Though in hindsight, I don't know why anybody was surprised I wanted to be an actor. So I'm now an actor and everybody's kind of like going with it. There is support, of course, we all went on Christmas to go see Color Purple, and there was this like genuine, I'm so proud of you moment. My brother and sister are in the industry as well.
Wow.
Every immigrant parent moves to a different country trying to provide opportunities that didn't exist in the one they came from, or at least not to the same degree. So most African parents, Asian parents, they don't West Indian parents, like nobody wants you to go do something that's unpredictable, not guaranteed to work, which I can hold space for. Um, I do think it's important though to acknowledge when people are in alignment with what is meant for them in spite of what seems to be what might be the easiest and what might be best. So I am here, an actor.
Yay, I'm glad. Your story is very similar about your parents not really wanting you per se to be an actor. I interviewed I don't know if you know who Isabel Du is. She is Vietnamese.
Mm,
And her parents were like, well, you need to go into a career that's you'll make money.
mhm,
Why can't you be like this person? And she did it. And, she was on like Vietnamese soaps. And then, of course, when she moved here, she had to start from the ground up. But now she's doing like national commercials. She's been in
uh,
a few, her and her husband were on, it's some show. I can't think of it. Actually, no, I know another couple that was on there. I'll have to think about it and tell you. But they
yeah.
were on a show together as husband and wife.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes. So you recently played Mary Ellen in the cast of the musical adaptation of The Color Purple.
Mhm.
Talk to us about that role and what was your favorite experience about being a part of the cast?
My favorite experience of being a part of the cast was literally just kind of being in the room and watching these titans standing with each other, and there's just a lot of support. My last day on set, I was in a trailer with Tamala Mann, Fantasia, Danielle, and Taraji, and the like just sisterhood and encouragement, and I think there was like marriage advice, and
Oh,
um Tasia put on one of Tamala's songs, and we're all like weeping gently, listening to like praising the, it was there was this heart. There's a lot of heart. I think when you give traditionally marginalized groups opportunities, surprisingly, they rise to the occasion. It's almost as if opportunity is the only thing keeping them from being successful. So being able to be present for that was absolutely a blessing. Um, that I know I will never forget. And playing the character was cool. Thinking of this question, I tend to audition for like detective, cop, maybe like junior lawyer, junior ADA. And I said junior ADA, junior assistant. Okay, go with me on this.
Uh-huh.
My type is young professional. So to be able to be in period pieces is always very fun because the amount of just poise and grace that kind of exists in the way women carried themselves back then is like, oh, you saw that in me? Ew. And then, of course, the character in the original movie had children, and there's a little bit more kind of put on top of it. In the musical, her name is said over a phone call. But what Blitz did with this, I thought really gave this moment of even when somebody is awful, you're still kind of socially obligated to honor them,
Mhm.
even if you don't like, and everybody's kind of reluctantly sitting in this church, like, well, I guess this fucking guy's dead now. Like, that's good. So to then be able to have that moment with Tasia in the shop, again, is this refocusing on sisterhood. It's this shared and unspoken, I'm sure, years and years of abuse that you don't have to say anything because we're all coming from the same conversation. It's just, hey girl, like here's this thing for you and your sister. And being able to give her back what she didn't even realize she had in the first place, I think is also really powerful. Um, and then in watching the film, to see that it is at this crazy pace telling the story, the songs that are happening left and right, and then it slows down to kind of honor this moment. And then, look who's wearing the pants now, and it takes right back off. And I think I don't know, it was really cool.
Yeah.
It was an honor. It was wild to watch because I was like, "Nuh-uh, me." Um, I still am not sure how they, thank you, more please. I receive it. I'm not complaining. But to really watch that film the first time, I was gobsmacked. So it was a wonderful experience, and I'm so grateful for it.
Wow. That sounds like you had an amazing time on set.
Which
And
isn't always the case. So yes.
oh, no, yeah, I know. So we're going to take a break, but we'll be right back. Welcome back to Conversations with Atlanta's Movers and Shakers. I am your host, Mandisa Johnson. Today we are having a conversation with Adetinpo Thomas. Besides playing Mary Ellen in the musical film adaptation of The Color Purple, you also played Jamila Olsen in the hit TV series Black Lightning, as well as Wendy in Hawkeye, amongst many other characters. Can you share with us some ways you get into character?
One of my favorite ways is through music.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people have some sort of soundtrack that backs their lives, whether it's Britney Spears or D'Angelo, and there's kind of something fueling it, inspiring you, making you dance or making you cry. And I think that gives a really deep kind of insight into the characters, especially when it's something like a period piece, because it's, what were the songs out that I would have been listening to? Was it the white version or the black version? Was it, on a track? Was it on a record? And being able to kind of anchor myself in the time and then in the, for lack of a better phrase, the vibe. Um, I enjoy that. I journal in character often. I use some kind of version of the like Stanislavski, Le Bon, technique where Laban is movement, but it's movement efforts that embody a trait. So a person would float, and the kind of person who would float might be like a hippie versus a person who might punch, which would be like a lawyer, or a press, which could be I don't know, a detective, kind of really leaning in and digging in and pushing. Uh, and then Stanislavski is more like lived experiences informing the work, and some combination of that I have kind of devised into my own technique that I think has provided a kind of quick jump into, but it also gives me the opportunity to kind of roll around in the character work, because the character work is my favorite part.
Mhm.
Um, so I kind of nerd out, I think is the answer. I've got like all kinds of journals. I have a journal for when I'm prepping the audition. I have a journal for once I've booked it and I'm actually like working on it for real. When it's a series, it becomes the kind of thing where, you have to kind of mark out all of your scenes, because if what you end up shooting first is the last scene of the episode, or your last scene of the episode, but also other stuff happened before, but you haven't been living with that experience because you haven't personally done it yet, that doesn't quite work. At least it didn't work for me. I didn't like it. So being able to like do things like that really um, makes it fun for me. I have a really good time.
Wow, that's really cool that you use music and journaling because I teach kindergarten on the side.
Nice.
Just talking about the other day how we have one student who's very, very, very artsy. Like she thrives in like art class and music, but when it comes to like writing, she can do it, but then she can't do it, if that makes sense. But how
Hmm.
she recognizes letters, she uses it through music or she uses it through repetition.
Hmm.
How a lot of people learn, period. I asked her, what does the sound make? And she said, M like Mrs. Johnson. And I was like, okay, she's making that connection. Or what
Hmm.
really threw me off is when I asked her, what does the d sound? What letter does that make? And she said, D like your daughter. And I'm like, you're 5. How do you know that daughter starts with D? But she made the connection.
Hmm.
So um, I like that. Um, and I want to be sure to pass those ways on to other people
I
too.
think acknowledging that people learn differently is what is going to set aside probably like the Gen X millennial generation and down from what came before that. Because I mean, even in my teaching, I on the first day of class, we went through the syllabus and I was like, cool, are you guys like visual learners, like audible learners? Is it tactile? And I, jotted down the answers and I kind of pivot based on what's going on. I know I can explain the directions out loud 15 times,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm still going to need to type it out and make sure they have something to reference back to, because they're not picking up everything I'm saying. So being able to acknowledge that things like, what is it, synesthesia, where people can look at uh, numbers and they have colors. So you're like, oh, the answer to this equation is pink. And it's because like odd numbers are pink for them or something like that. Like I think that's really cool. So the association with that and then the alphabet makes perfect sense. Ideally, somebody meets her where she's at the rest of her educational experience, because she sounds like she is a childhood genius.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. And I'm a visual learner, so I get her. It's just trying to get her to do the work when we do writing and reading. So there's a portion of your website where you talk about what you wish you would have known. Can you
Mhm.
share with newer actors a few things you wish you would have known before working in film and TV?
Um, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Mm.
It takes 15 years to be an overnight success, minimum, if it ever happens. Just because people smile doesn't mean they're nice, and just because they're nice doesn't make them your friend.
Mm,
Do the work in a way that's sustainable, and none of it is worth your integrity.
I like all that,
Mm.
especially the integrity part. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
We like to ask all our movers and shakers what we call GEMS, which stands for Great Educational Moments with Movers and Shakers. Do you have any gems you would like to share for our readers and viewers?
So a huge educational moment for me was working on Black Lightning. It happened while I was working on Black Lightning. I mean, I had PA'd on the show before I was cast on the show. I worked as a health and safety. No, that's not true. I worked as a extras casting PA for part of season one and then was going to start full time season three. I had an audition, I think three different auditions in June. And the first day of, July is when I was supposed to start working full time. So I think I had gotten like 2 weeks under my belt or something. And I get called into the production office, still wondering, like, damn, I know I killed that audition. It's been so like literally the head of the department and her assistant went to the meeting. There weren't enough chairs because it was the first production meeting of the season. So I sat back in our office and like watched my audition again. And I was like, I know I did a good job. It's okay. Like I did good. And I got called into the meeting after all. And when I walked into the room, everybody started clapping.
Wow.
And that's how I found out I was cast. I say that and give that context to say that when it was time for me to show up on set, my anxiety started to get the best of me. The first episode, I was cool, and conveniently for me, that was the one Salim directed, so I felt like I did it in front of the boss. I'm cool. But the second episode threw like a real, I don't know, curveball at me, and I could not get through my lines. And
Mm.
the panic of disappointing them made it worse. And this doom spiral of I can't say this. Okay, now I need to try to get to and what is and how can I? Okay, no, it's gonna be fine. And I was like, oh no, they're gonna fire me, and I'm embarrassed. And it wasn't until I think so I did episode two, three, maybe four, and then by the end of four, I was like, okay, no, I've got this. I understand. Like, hopefully they bring me back. I can do this because conveniently for me, it only happened on even episodes. But the gag is the same crew on even episodes. So half the crew was watching me fuck up every time I got up there. And then finally one episode, all I had to do was act. Because what was happening, if you recall the character at all, one episode I'm like looking directly into the camera, which is like the biggest no-no. So my mind's already doing backflips, trying to wrap its brain around that. I'm looking into the camera, and in the camera, I'm watching myself because I'm a reporter. But because the camera's facing me, I can also see everything that's happening behind me
Oh,
and all
wow.
the people who are moving around and doing stuff, plus the fact that there's a cameraman and his assistant walking in front of me because I'm also moving while I'm doing this. It's also 7 o'clock in the morning, which means they had to open the street up to traffic that was going to work that day. So there's also traffic going back and forth down the street. And I'm trying to do this page long monologue of news that from one sentence to the next didn't quite connect. And I hadn't figured out like my best, memorization strategies by then. The next episode I think I was walking backwards in really painful shoes. There's one where they handed me a gimbal and it was like not sitting on my face because I was walking by a crowd full of people and it was just thing after thing after thing that I couldn't quite prepare for. And we get to an episode where all I have to do is act, and we do the first take and I nail it.
Wow.
And it's one of those page long straight to camera monologues. And everybody's like, hold on a second. Mind you, my scene started to become the last scene of the day because I was like the lowest ranking person for the day when I was there. And I remember the first AD kind of like, all right, look, everybody settle in. I was like, well, thanks very much, guys. Like, sheesh. Um, I do it, first take, nail it. And everybody's like, oh shit. Director's like, I guess one more for safety. Do it again, nail it. They're like, okay, that's a wrap. And everybody, I think, was expecting to have to sit there another hour and watch me fumble through my lines. And I appreciate the full circle moment that was able to happen in real time. I said, yeah, it's a lot easier when all I have to do is act. Like, made sure I said it a little extra loud. And I could see people doing the math like, oh, yeah, this is the only time I had to sit still and just act. Every other time, I'm like quite literally juggling. The takeaway, the gem, as it were. Being super anxious is hard to manage, but it's not going to make it easier. So, if anything, kind of letting go of the anticipation or expectation you're putting on yourself, because all you can do in those moments is trust that you can do it, and then try to calm yourself as you're going through the experience. There will always be things that they will throw at you that you cannot anticipate. It might not be every episode, it might not be every project, but when it shows up, it shows up. And you still have to figure it out because you're the actor and that's your job. And most people don't realize how hard acting actually is. So be nice to yourself, take things in stride, and learn how to manage your anxiety.
That was good. I guess it's more like too getting out of your head.
Yes.
A lot of that is getting out of your head because sometimes when I mean I will act. I don't like auditioning, uh,
Mm,
but it's getting out of my head. And then when I'm out of my head, I can act. And I didn't
mhm,
realize how good I did until my husband saw it. He's like, "Wow, you're really good." But it's
mm,
if I would get out of my head, I could do it, but I kind of like put acting on the back burner and do this.
yeah. And what people don't talk enough about is that there are already so many things that can come up that can be stressful. When
Mhm.
you get to set, before you get to your mark for the first take of whatever, the first rehearsal, probably like 15 different people have literally touched you.
Mhm.
So that's already overstimulating. You've talked to 6 or 7 different people to, okay, somebody caught you in the parking lot, somebody made sure you got here, somebody else got your food order, somebody else took you to hair and makeup, somebody else took you to the, okay, now it's the wardrobe, and now we're walking over to, you usually don't know anybody at all if you're kind of earlier in your career. And it's just thing after thing after thing. And then God forbid you show up and they don't know how to do your hair.
Mm.
God
Mhm.
forbid you show up and the makeup is not dark enough, or costumes doesn't have underwear that's nude for you, and you wore red because you weren't thinking you were going to be wearing a white t-shirt that day. um, I know way too many Black women who have to pack a bag to every set they go to that has a wig and hair gel and a black girl brush and their own foundation and their own whatever, just to try to catch that, to save themselves as an actor from having to deal with that triggering shit, and that trauma that obviously will come up. And then, of course, now you've got a new thing to add to the list. And then you get to set and they still expect you to act. And in fact, the stakes are higher because, see, this is why we always end up going with a white girl, because the white women are better at doing this. The Black people never seem to be prepared enough. Meanwhile, you're dealing with PTSD because you've been treated like shit for the entire time you've been there. And now you're supposed to come up and be, God forbid, again, then the role is sassy, or it's, there's a lot that we have to deal with that makes it even harder. And it's a hard job that's then put, 100-pound weight on top of it when people don't realize that they are completely dismissing your humanity.
Mhm.
So, yeah, make sure you learn how to get out of your own head and to love yourself and give yourself as much grace as possible, because in several ways, without it sounding like conspiracy theory, the cards are a little bit stacked against you,
Mm.
at least if you're a dark-skinned Black woman.
Yeah, that hair thing. I've watched, I'm not gonna say the film when I was doing background acting, but it was a period piece. And there was a girl, I think we were in the same, they had the hair, we had to go to a trailer for hair and makeup. And
Mm,
I remember the girl, my hair is naturally curly, but for this, I didn't wear it naturally curly. I had to curl it in wet, like of course, wash my
mhm,
curl it in curlers. But the girl didn't know how to handle her
mhm,
curls. So it was a lot of like snatching her head back and she was like, stop.
mhm.
I know how
Good
to
for her.
deal with my hair. And that was back in like 2014, 2015. So
Right.
I'm not sure how it is now because there's a lot of times when I'm working, I'll either do my own, how come with my hair already done with
That's
my
what I do.
curls, or I'll have braids, or I'll have like a sew-in or something, so I don't have those
Mm,
issues. But there was one time I was working background and my hair was pressed, and I remember my hair was perfectly fine, but
mhm,
the hair person came up and just started brushing my hair. And I remember it just being so hard. And she had a spray bottle. I was like, mm-mm, please don't spray that in my hair, because if you do, my hair is not going to look like this anymore. It's going to curl up.
Right.
So I understand completely with what you're saying. All the trauma, and then coming and having to act is takes a lot out of us as Black people. So
I Go
uh,
ahead.
go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say to answer your question, they just had to put a rule in the new SAG contract, one of the only actual good things that ended up happening in the SAG contract, where someone on set has to be able to do everybody's hair. You can't hire people who aren't able to do every single type of hair texture. And they had to make that a rule because. So
Yes.
that's how it's fixed for
Yeah,
now.
I did know that, but I guess we'll see what happens.
Right.
So, is there anything else you would like to share that we didn't get to talk about?
Oh, um, acting is fun.
Mm,
It can also be really hard, but actors are some of the smartest people I know, the most emotionally intelligent, the most self-actualized. Um, and I think sometimes there's this bad rap about just being like pretty and dumb.
mm,
And sometimes that's people too. But the reality of having to put on different people's personalities constantly means that you have to understand different people. And the people who tend to be doing it the best also understand themselves. So if it's something that you are interested in, maybe directly into the camera, don't let anything I've said be scary, but also don't walk in with rose-colored glasses. This is still work. This is still a job. It's a very blue-collar job at that. Um, we still have a union that has to fight for us and doesn't do a very good job most of the time. So know that, but also know that it is beautiful and it is cathartic and it does offer the kind of art that changes people, that teaches people compassion and empathy. And sometimes that's the only way to do it. That's the only thing that does. Art is the only thing that changes people for real. And you get to be a part of that.
thank you for
Well, you know,
sharing.
you can be an accountant too, and that'd be fine.
Right, right. So
Whatever works.
how can people connect with you?
Hmm. So I am Adetinpo, that's me, on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. And I have a website where if you want to, I guess, email me directly, there's contact form. I do coach. Um, and generally, I also have a series on Instagram where I talk about the realities of being an actor, and will just kind of things will come to mind, or I'll have a conversation with a friend and then make like a very honest video about the thing and how to kind of combat it. So if you want more of the very intense tidbits that I seem to offer, you can find them on Instagram at Adetinpo. That's me.
Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for joining us for this episode of Conversations with Atlanta's Movers and Shakers. Be sure to stay up to date by subscribing to AtlantaFilmandTV.com. Thank you.